Every zombie, every mutant, every apocalypse in the Resident Evil franchise traces back to a single flower in a single cave in West Africa. One discovery in 1966 set off a chain reaction of bioweapons that would spiral out of control for decades. So today, I'm breaking down the complete evolution of every virus in Resident Evil and everything we know about them, starting with the one that started it all, Progenitor virus. The Progenitor virus is potentially billions of years old. This thing was floating around as inactive junk DNA in the genomes of countless species before humans even existed, just sitting there, waiting for the right environmental trigger to wake up. And on December 4th, 1966, three researchers named James Marcus, Oswell Spencer, and Edward Ashford walked into an underground garden in West Africa, found a flower called the Stairway to the Sun, and pulled an ancient RNA retrovirus out of it that would eventually destroy the world several times over. Here's the thing about Progenitor. It doesn't care what you are. Animal, plant, fungal, bacterial. It can infect virtually any living organism on Earth, and in humans specifically, it's almost universally lethal. If your genetics aren't compatible, you're dead. No negotiation. But the Endopia Kingdom figured this out thousands of years before Umbrella ever existed. This ancient civilization built their entire culture around the Stairway to the Sun flowers, consuming them in rituals where the vast majority of participants died. The rare survivors, they became progenitor humans, gaining extraordinary longevity and enhanced intellect. Some Endopia monarchs reportedly reigned for hundreds of years, an entire kingdom running on bioengineered super rulers, millennia before anyone in a lab coat had the same idea. And then those same biological tools destroyed them. The same hubris that would later consume Umbrella consumed the Endopia first. They engineered their own extinction. That's the paradox at the heart of this entire franchise. Progenitor creates life. It repairs dead cells, revives deceased organisms, drives evolution forward. But it also threatens total extinction the moment someone tries to control it. Every single bioweapon that follows inherits this exact duality. But the first group to truly exploit Progenitor's power didn't just inherit the contradiction. They weaponized it into something far worse: T-Virus. Here's the thing about the T-Virus that most people get backwards. Umbrella wasn't trying to kill everyone, they were trying to build an army. And that distinction changes everything about how you understand this franchise. The problem with Progenitor was simple. It was too good at killing people. A pathogen that wipes out its host in hours is a terrible weapon because it burns through a population and then has nowhere left to go. What Umbrella needed was something contagious enough to spread through enemy lines, but survivable enough that the infected would keep walking, keep fighting, keep being useful. On January 13th, 1978, Dr. James Marcus cracked it. By splicing leech DNA into the progenitor genome, he created a deliberately weakened strain that could actually let human hosts survive infection. The T-Virus was born, not as a doomsday weapon, but as a compromise, which is, not ideal when you're talking about a compromise between kills everyone instantly and kills everyone slowly. But the real breakthrough came from William Birkin. He spliced Ebola RNA into the T-Virus genome, creating the beta strain, and this is the one that actually produced zombies. The virus destroys your mitochondria and replaces them with viral copies that produce just barely enough energy to keep your motor neurons and lower brain functions running. Everything else dies. Your higher brain function, gone. Your personality, gone. Meanwhile, the virus is shredding your hypothalamus, flooding your system with norepinephrine and dopamine, which is why zombies are so relentlessly aggressive. They're not mindless. They're chemically locked into a permanent state of rage and hunger. But here's the kicker. Approximately 10% of humans are naturally immune. 1 in 10 people just shrug it off. That limitation, combined with the fact that your soldiers are brain-dead cannibals who can't follow orders, meant the T-Virus was fundamentally flawed as a military product. And that's not a footnote. That's the entire reason every other virus in this franchise exists. T. veronica, G virus, Ouroboros. All of them exist because the T virus wasn't good enough. It was the prototype that worked just well enough to prove the concept and just poorly enough to guarantee decades of increasingly insane attempts to fix it. But if you think a virus that turns people into brain dead, rotting husks is bad, wait until you hear about the one designed by a 12-year-old girl who put herself in a freezer for 15 years. Veronica virus. Most viruses in this franchise were designed to make weapons. weapons. T. Veronica was designed to make a god, specifically a 12-year-old god with a queen ant complex and zero regard for her own father's well-being. Let me explain. Alexia Ashford was a child prodigy who graduated university at age 10 and immediately decided that the T-virus was thinking too small. Her vision wasn't military, it was transhumanist. She discovered a retrovirus hiding in the genome of queen ants and became obsessed with replicating ant colony hierarchy in humans, with herself sitting comfortably at the top as the supreme queen controlling every infected organism on Earth. She combined this ant retrovirus with progenitor and plant genes, creating something entirely new. Here's the thing. She fundamentally misunderstood how ant colonies actually work and built her entire doomsday plan around that misunderstanding, which is, not ideal. The first human trial happened in 1982, and the lucky volunteer was Alexander Ashford, her genetic donor and essentially her father. He didn't volunteer. Alexia and her brother Alfred injected him by force, and the results were catastrophic. Alexander's brain degenerated, his body twisted into a horrific chimera, and the facility staff started calling him Nosferatu. They locked him away in the Antarctic base and tried to forget he existed. But here's where it gets genuinely insane. After watching her father turn into a monster, 12-year-old Alexia injected herself with the same virus and climbed into a cryogenic pod. Her theory was that by slowing the virus's spread over 15 years, she could achieve gradual genetic rewriting without the brain cell destruction that killed every other host's mind. She looked at a failed experiment that turned a man into a screaming abomination and said, "I'll just do it slower." And she was right. When Alexia woke up 15 years later, she had insectoid appendages, superhuman strength, blood that burned at extreme temperatures, and psychic control over anything infected with T. Veronica. Genuinely, one of the most powerful beings in the entire franchise, and it was completely useless as a weapon. Zero airborne transmission, no way to spread it without direct injection, and the only method for preserving intelligence required 15 years of cryogenic incubation. You can't exactly pitch that to a military buyer. Great news, General. Your super soldier will be ready in 2039. Years later, Dr. Carla Radames reverse-engineered T. Veronica into a strain called T02, stripping out uncontrolled mutations and combining what was left with progenitor. The result preserved host intelligence without the incubation period, and it became a critical ingredient in something far worse. But if T. Veronica was a virus obsessed with evolution, the next one took that concept and removed every safety rail imaginable. G-Virus. Everything we've talked about so far, the progenitor, the T-Virus, T. Veronica, all of it was scary, but it was scary in a way you could wrap your head around. Zombies, monsters, parasites, you get it. The G-Virus is where Resident Evil crosses the line from dangerous bioweapon to existential threat to all human life, and the worst part is how it was discovered. Lisa Trevor had been a test subject since the late 1960s. 3 decades of continuous experimental injections. Every strain Umbrella could cook up got pumped into this woman's body. Then in 1988, researchers implanted an NEA-type parasite in her, and her immune system just destroyed it, which should have been impossible. When William Birkin investigated why, he found a dormant virus hiding inside her that nobody had ever seen before, something that may have existed in her body for the entire 30 years of torture, quietly evolving through every single injection they gave her. 3 decades of human experimentation accidentally produced the most dangerous organism ever created, which is, not ideal. Here's the thing about G-Virus. It shares a common ancestor with T-Virus through progenitor, but the two are totally dissimilar. Where T-Virus causes necrosis and relatively minor mutations, G-Virus rewrites a person so completely they become unrecognizable as human. And critically, T-mutants are almost universally infertile. G-mutants can reproduce asexually. They literally regurgitate embryos. Cool. Add that to the list. The infection spreads outward from the injection site, converting cells into G cells that produce additional virus as they go. This means the body mutates asymmetrically. Birkin injected himself in the right arm, so his right arm became massively more muscular than his left. A full vial triggers mutation within seconds, and as the mutations progress, functioning eyeballs spontaneously develop in random locations across the body, comparable to teratomas, just eyes, everywhere, for no reason. I don't know what to tell you, but here's where it gets truly terrifying. terrifying. The more you hurt a G mutant, the stronger it becomes. Mutations accelerate dramatically in response to physical trauma, meaning every bullet, every explosion, every attempt to kill it just makes it evolve faster. You're not fighting a monster, you're feeding one. The virus can repair dead cells, revive deceased organisms, and theoretically grant biological immortality through constant cellular regeneration. BSAA policy mandates immediate alert of all forces the moment G-virus is detected. Not investigate, not monitor. All forces, immediate. The G-virus was the moment the bioweapon arms race went from, we can control this, to, we absolutely cannot. But if you think an uncontrollable virus is bad, wait until you hear about an ancient parasite that controls you, Las Plagas. Every bioweapon we've talked about so far was built in a lab. Some scientist in a basement somewhere splicing genes, injecting test subjects, and praying the result didn't immediately eat them. Las Plagas flips that entire concept on its head, because these things weren't engineered, they weren't designed. They evolved naturally, potentially thousands of years before Umbrella even existed. Las Plagas are parasitic arthropods belonging to an unknown taxonomical order, which is science speak for, we literally don't know what category of animal this is. They display characteristics of insects, plants, and fungi simultaneously. They reproduce asexually, progress through 3 developmental stages after hatching, and they can control a host's nervous system through direct neural integration. Nature just casually invented the perfect bioweapon, and nobody had to spend a single research dollar. Here's where it gets interesting. The Salazar family in rural Spain knew about Las Plagas for generations. The parasites were sealed deep beneath Salazar Castle by a previous Castellan who understood exactly how dangerous they were. The family kept them locked away, buried under stone in silence, treating them less like a scientific curiosity and more like a curse that should never see daylight again. That worked for a very long time, and then Osmond Sadler showed up and convinced the young, impressionable Ramon Salazar to unseal the cave. Miners sent into the excavation site inhaled ancient spores, and the parasites regenerated inside their bodies. A species that had been functionally dormant for centuries just woke back up. Cool, that's also a thing that happened. But the real genius of Las Plagas is what they solved. Every previous bioweapon had the same fatal flaw. The hosts were either mindless, uncontrollable, or both. T-virus zombies shamble around biting things with zero tactical awareness. G-mutants are walking catastrophes with no off switch. Plagas-infected ganados? They retain speech. They use tools. They operate vehicles. They execute flanking maneuvers. They maintain daily routines. These aren't corpses stumbling through a hallway. These are functional soldiers. And the command structure is brilliant. Sadler cultivated dominant species Plagas, creating a strain that allowed hosts to retain full cognitive function and free will while broadcasting orders to entire ganado armies through parasitic control signals. It's a built-in military hierarchy. Generals who think for themselves, commanding troops who obey without question. Las Plagas proved that nature had already perfected what Umbrella spent decades failing to build. But if you think a naturally evolved parasite is terrifying, wait until you see what happens when someone combines progenitor with a god complex and a plan to rewrite human DNA, Ouroboros. Every virus we've covered so far was built to create weapons. Soldiers, monsters, controllable armies. Ouroboros wasn't built to create anything. It was built to delete people. Albert Wesker didn't want a bioweapon. He wanted a filter. A biological sorting mechanism that would wash over the entire human species and separate the worthy from the worthless. If your DNA passed the test, congratulations. You get to be a god. If it didn't, you get torn apart from the inside while your own biomass keeps moving without you, which is, not ideal. Here's the thing. Ouroboros wasn't derived from the T-virus or G-virus or any of the second generation stuff we've been talking about. Wesker went straight back to the source. Pure progenitor. The original ancient retrovirus that started this entire nightmare decades ago. After years of derivative viruses building on top of each other like a biological game of telephone, Wesker looked at the whole lineage and said, no, give me the raw material. He and Tricell built their research facility in West Africa, right next to an abandoned Umbrella lab inside the caverns of the former Ndapaya kingdom. The same caverns where progenitor was first discovered. Full circle. The name itself tells you everything. Ouroboros. The Greek Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, destruction and creation as the same act. This was Oswald Spencer's eugenics philosophy taken to its logical, horrifying conclusion. Spencer dreamed of a purified humanity. Wesker decided he'd personally make it happen through selective extinction. The infection mechanic is one of the most dramatic in the entire series. Compatible hosts enter a lysogenic stage where the virus mutates them slowly, carefully, potentially creating stable superhumans. Incompatible hosts, runaway mutations that violently rip them apart. But here's where it gets unsettling. The infected biomatter doesn't stop. It continues existing as its own separate entity, not alive, not dead, just a writhing mass of black tendrils that used to be a person. Like Progenitor and G-Virus before it, Ouroboros can repair dead cells and revive deceased organisms. And as of 2011, there was 0 known vaccine. Excessive mutations, mental deterioration, organism instability. 3 problems, 0 solutions, and because nothing in this franchise stays contained, a breach in May 2008 resulted in Ouroboros infecting cockroaches. The resulting creatures were designated Reapers, and they were exactly as horrible as that name implies. Alex Wesker later conducted her own investigations into Ouroboros, specifically looking into stabilization procedures, because apparently one Wesker trying to end the world wasn't enough. But if Ouroboros was Wesker's attempt to rewrite humanity through raw progenitor power, the next virus on our list took a very different approach, stitching together the worst parts of everything that came before it into something even more versatile: C-Virus. Every bioweapon we've covered so far had a fatal flaw. T-Virus destroyed your brain. T-Veronica required 15 years of cryogenic sleep. G-Virus turned you into an unrecognizable meat pile. The C-Virus looked at all of them and said, "I'll take the best parts, thanks." The Chrysalid virus is Frankenstein's monster in pathogen form, literally stitched together from the greatest hits of every previous bioweapon. And the development pipeline reads less like a research project and more like a heist. Step 1. Acquire T-Veronica samples, likely extracted from Manuela Hidalgo in 2002, a girl who'd been kept in a half-transformed state through constant organ transplants. Step 2. Reverse engineer those samples into a new strain called T02 by stripping out the genetic code responsible for uncontrolled mutations. Step 3. Combine T02 with G-Virus obtained from Sherry Birkin's body, where it had been quietly producing G-cells since 1998. The whole operation was orchestrated by Derek Simmons and Dr. Carla Radames of The Family between 2001 and 2009. 8 years of work to build the perfect weapon, and it worked. Direct injection of C-Virus created Javo, the first truly terrifying, intelligent bioweapon soldiers in the franchise. These weren't shambling corpses or mindless beasts. Javo retained human-level cognition, could speak, coordinate tactical flanking maneuvers, operate complex weapons, and even drive vehicles. But here's where it gets genuinely nightmarish. When a Javo took damage, the injured body part would instantly mutate in response. Shoot one in the arm, that arm becomes a massive claw. Blow off a leg, it sprouts tentacles. They weaponize the healing process itself, turning every injury into an upgrade. The more you hurt them, the worse your situation got. And that was just the injection method. Aerosolized deployment was achieved through Lopatica creatures, bloated horrors that expelled C-Virus gas from massive pores across their bodies, creating zombies on a tactical scale. You could blanket an entire city block. Experts have identified C-Virus as the only pathogen in the entire franchise that meets every criterion for a real-world global extinction event. Not T-Virus, not G-Virus, not Ouroboros, the C-Virus, which is, not ideal. Then came the enhanced C-Virus, synthesized from Jake Muller's blood. This variant halted mutations at a complete mutation stage while making further mutation the standard response to severe injury. Only 3 samples were ever created, and each one mutated its host in radically different ways. Simmons, Radames, and Piers Nivans all received doses, and no 2 transformations looked remotely alike. The virus had peaked, the bioweapons arms race had reached its absolute ceiling, and then it ended. The anti-C vaccine was developed in 2013, rendering C-Virus militarily obsolete almost overnight. The most dangerous pathogen ever engineered, neutralized by a needle. Sometimes the arms race doesn't end with a bigger bomb. It ends with a better shield. But if you think the franchise was done introducing new horrors after that, you clearly haven't met the thing growing underneath an Eastern European village. Bold, Megamycete, Every bioweapon we've talked about so far was built in a lab. Someone in a white coat took a virus, stuck it in a test tube, and tried to make it worse. The mold didn't need any of that. It was already worse, it was already smarter, and it had been sitting under an Eastern European mountain range for longer than anyone can calculate, just waiting. In 1919, a biologist named Miranda stumbled into a cave system beneath her village and discovered something that shouldn't exist: the megamycete, a vast fungal supercolony taking the rough shape of a human fetus with countless tendrils extending through rock and soil in every direction, a giant fungal baby buried underground, which is, not ideal, but here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. The megamycete isn't just a big mushroom, it's a biological hard drive. Every organism that makes physical contact with the mold gets absorbed, and the megamycete stores their genetic code, their memories, and their conscious minds. Countless human consciousnesses exist inside this thing, pulled from buried corpses the fungal network consumed over centuries. The dead don't rest in this region, they get uploaded, and through something called the realm of consciousness, mold-connected humans can communicate with the superorganism through lucid dreams. It's not just storing people, it's talking to them. The mechanism behind all of this is quorum sensing, a real biochemical communication process where molecule concentrations trigger coordinated responses across an entire infected population. Think of it as a biological internet. Every fungal cluster exchanges thoughts and memories with every other cluster, creating a distributed collective consciousness across the entire network. One organism, millions of nodes, zero central failure point. Now, a shady organization called The Connections got their hands on mold samples in the 1990s and immediately asked the worst possible question: can we weaponize this? Turns out yes. They created E-type bioweapons by infecting human embryos with the mold and cultivating them over roughly 40 weeks. The result was Eveline, a creature that looked like a child but could project hallucinations directly into infected minds. Voices, whispers, full psychological warfare designed to shatter conscious resistance until brainwashing took over completely. Disguise a bioweapon as a child refugee, infiltrate an enemy position, and have her mentally enslave every soldier in the building. One of the darkest ideas this franchise has ever produced. Miranda herself demonstrated horizontal gene transfer, absorbing DNA from any organism she touched and building a living archive of biological templates she could deploy at will. Physical mold infection produces a pale greenish skin tone from fungal cells penetrating the host's body, though hosts who resisted neurological control retained normal skin. Ethan Winters and Carl Heisenberg both carried the infection, without looking like walking compost heaps, because the mold never fully hijacked their minds. Every previous bioweapon in this franchise was a tool someone built. The mold is something that was already there, already thinking, already collecting. It makes the T-virus look like a science fair project, but if you think the megamycete itself is disturbing, wait until you see what Miranda created using it as raw material. Cut out! Every virus, parasite, and fungal nightmare we've covered so far was built in a lab by a corporation, a government, or a megalomaniac with a god complex. The Kadu was built by a grieving mother in a Romanian village, and somehow it's the most sophisticated bioweapon in the entire franchise. Here's the thing. Mother Miranda didn't have Umbrella's funding. She didn't have Tricell's infrastructure or the family's global intelligence network. What she had was a cave full of ancient, super-intelligent fungus, and a dead daughter she refused to let go of. The name Kadu literally translates to gift in Romanian, because Miranda saw these parasites as offerings, presents for hosts she deemed worthy of carrying her daughter's consciousness back into the world. Not military contracts, not global domination, just a mother who wanted her kid back. The Kadu themselves were created from nematodes exposed to the mold, transformed into parasitic vectors capable of rapidly mutating a human host from the inside out. They looked almost identical to the black god at the core of the megamycete, which is not a coincidence. Miranda essentially miniaturized the hive organism. She took a fungal supercolony the size of a cavern system and compressed its core functionality into something she could surgically implant into a single person. That's like shrinking the entire internet into a flash drive and having it actually work. Most hosts died within hours. The mold spread too fast. The body couldn't adapt, and the result was just another lichen howling in the woods. But Miranda had spent decades cataloging genetic templates from the Megamycete's stored biological archive. She knew, down to the individual, who could handle a Caduce and who couldn't. Her 4 lords are the proof. Alcina Dimitrescu gained extreme height, functionally stopped aging, and ruled a pseudo-feudal aristocracy for over 60 years while maintaining enough personality to throw lavish dinner parties and murder anyone who annoyed her, which is, not ideal for the local population, but impressive from a bioengineering standpoint. Each lord received a completely different mutation tailored to their specific genetic profile. Heisenberg got electromagnetic control. Beneviento got psychic hallucination projection. Moreau got the short end of the stick, but the point stands. Miranda could customize these parasites like she was writing prescriptions, and that's what makes the Cadu the final synthesis of everything this franchise has been building toward. Take Progenitor's raw mutagenic power, add Las Plagas' neural hijacking and host preservation, layer in the mold's ability to store and transfer consciousness itself. Now put all of that in the hands of one woman who spent a century perfecting the process. Not for profit or power, but because she missed her daughter. Umbrella couldn't do this. Tricell couldn't do this. The family with all their resources couldn't do this. A single biologist in a forgotten Eastern European village, armed with nothing but grief and an ancient fungus, achieved a mastery of biological weaponization that every corporation and government in the series failed to reach. The most advanced bioweapon lineage in Resident Evil history wasn't driven by military ambition or corporate greed. It was driven by a mother who never stopped mourning. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.